Las Vegas was once sold as the cheapest playground in America, a place where tourists could eat a massive buffet for just $5.99, grab a hotel room for less than $40 a night, and still walk away with money in their pockets. But today, that dream has collapsed. Locals are being crushed under rent prices soaring past $2,000 a month. Tourists are paying hidden resort fees that can exceed $50 a night, and even basic groceries in this desert city cost more than in places like Los Angeles or New York. The shocking part? None of this happened by accident. Behind the neon glow, Las Vegas has quietly transformed into one of the most expensive places to survive in America. What was once a city built on cheap thrills is now forcing ordinary families out, while massive corporations rake in billions. So why is it that living costs in the middle of the Nevada desert, a place that doesn't even produce its own food or water, are skyrocketing faster than almost anywhere else in the country? And the bigger question, if the cost of living in Las Vegas has become unbearable, what does that reveal about the future of the so-called American dream? For decades, Las Vegas thrived on one promise: cheap living, cheap travel, and endless entertainment. The city marketed itself as the ultimate escape where everyday Americans could afford to live and tourists could indulge without draining their savings. In the 1990s, Las Vegas was often ranked among the most affordable big cities in the United States. Home prices averaged under $120,000, and even in the mid-2000s, a family could buy a suburban home for a fraction of what it cost in California. But fast forward to today, and the numbers tell a very different story. According to recent housing reports, the median rent in Las Vegas now sits between $1,700 and $2,000 per month, while the median home price hovers around $430,000. These figures are staggering when compared to the city's median household income, which lingers just above $65,000 a year. In short, the math doesn't add up. Families are spending more than half their income just to keep a roof over their heads. The problem doesn't stop with housing. The cost of basic utilities in Las Vegas is among the highest in the nation. Thanks to the scorching desert climate, electric bills often exceed $300 a month during summer, while water scarcity drives up municipal fees year after year. Add in transportation costs, insurance rates, and groceries that must be trucked into the desert from other states, and the total cost of living in Las Vegas now surpasses many major metropolitan areas once considered far pricier. A city that built its brand on affordability has quietly become unaffordable for the very people who sustain it. Tourism. The lifeblood of Las Vegas has also shifted the equation. While the city once relied on millions of budget-conscious visitors, corporations have increasingly focused on squeezing higher profits from fewer, wealthier guests. That strategy means higher hotel prices, inflated restaurant bills, and layers of hidden fees that don't just affect tourists, they ripple through the entire local economy. Workers in the service industry, who make up the majority of the city's labor force, are stuck in a vicious cycle: low wages that don't keep pace with inflation, paired with skyrocketing living costs that make survival nearly impossible. What makes this even more shocking is the speed of the transformation. Within just a decade, Las Vegas shifted from a city known for cheap buffets and bargain hotels to one where locals and visitors alike complain that it feels more expensive than New York or Los Angeles. For a city in the middle of the desert with no natural resources and no major industries beyond tourism and gambling, this raises an uncomfortable question: if Las Vegas is no longer affordable, then who exactly is it being built for? The first signs that Las Vegas was becoming too expensive didn't arrive with a whisper; they hit like a punch in the gut. Tourists who once bragged about cheap Vegas getaways began flooding online forums with complaints. Locals who had long tolerated the ups and downs of a boom and bust economy suddenly realized that daily life was becoming unsustainable. The shocks came one after another, each one more unsettling than the last. One of the earliest shocks was the death of the legendary cheap buffet. For decades, buffets were the beating heart of Vegas hospitality. Visitors could pile their plates high with prime rib shrimp cocktails and desserts for less than $20. But by the early 2020s, these iconic buffets began vanishing. Some closed permanently during the pandemic and never returned, while others reopened with jaw-dropping price hikes. Today, a simple buffet can cost $50 per person or more, turning what was once a symbol of Vegas generosity into a luxury reserved for tourists willing to pay a premium. For locals, the loss was more than just food. It was a sign that the city's affordable identity was gone for good. Then came the explosion of hidden fees. Hotels across the Strip introduced or expanded resort fees, once an optional add-on, now mandatory charges that can tack on $40 to $60 per night to a bill. Parking, which used to be free to encourage visitors, now costs $15 to $25 per day at many casinos. Even Wi-Fi, once marketed as complimentary, is folded into inflated room rates. The result is a bait-and-switch economy, where advertised deals lure in guests only to trap them with a final bill nearly double what they expected. Locals too feel the sting when hosting friends and family, or even just trying to enjoy their own city's attractions. The shocks weren't limited to entertainment. Utility bills skyrocketed, especially during record-breaking heat waves that pushed temperatures above 115 degrees. Power companies facing increased demand passed costs directly onto consumers. Meanwhile, grocery prices surged. Because Las Vegas sits in the middle of the desert, nearly everything must be transported in. By 2025, the cost of basic groceries in Vegas was reported to be 10 to 15% higher than the national average. A gallon of milk that once cost $2.50 could easily hit $5. Families found themselves cutting back, not just on luxuries, but on essentials. Even gas prices delivered a shock. Nevada consistently ranks among the states with the highest gasoline costs, and in Las Vegas, drivers routinely pay more than the national average. For a city where public transportation is limited and most people rely on cars, this added yet another burden to already strained budgets. The combination of rising rents, disappearing cheap meals, soaring utility bills, and inflated transportation costs created a perfect storm that left both residents and tourists reeling. What made these shocks particularly brutal was the sense of betrayal. Vegas was never supposed to be this way. It was built on the promise of affordable escape, where even working-class families could feel like high rollers for a weekend. Instead, the city seemed to be flipping that promise upside down. Locals felt abandoned while visitors felt tricked. And as these first shocks reverberated through the Strip and the suburbs, one chilling realization emerged. The people paying the highest price were often those least able to afford it. But if these were only the opening moves, what would happen when the voices of those living and working inside this broken system finally broke through? When you strip away the neon lights and the carefully crafted advertisements, the truth about Las Vegas emerges from the mouths of those who live and work here every single day. These are not high rollers or casino bosses. They are bartenders, hotel cleaners, taxi drivers, cooks, and lifelong residents who have seen the city transform into something they barely recognize. Their stories reveal not just financial strain, but deep disillusionment. Take the words of a casino dealer who has worked on the Strip for over 20 years. She recalls when her wage could comfortably cover rent, food, and the occasional night out. Now she says, "I'm making the same money I did in 2010, but my rent has doubled, and my groceries cost almost twice as much. I feel like I'm working just to pay bills, not to live." Her story isn't unique. Thousands of service workers find themselves trapped in jobs tied directly to tourism, while the very system that profits from their labor pushes them closer to the edge of eviction. Locals also point to the disappearance of community spaces. Families used to gather at affordable buffets, budget-friendly shows, or neighborhood restaurants. But as prices climbed, those traditions faded. One lifelong resident lamented that even something as simple as taking his kids to a Strip hotel pool now costs a small fortune. "It's like they don't want locals here anymore," he said. "Vegas used to be ours. Now it feels like it belongs only to the corporations and the tourists." Tourists themselves are not staying quiet. Online reviews are filled with angry comments about unexpected charges, outrageous food prices, and the feeling of being nickel and dimed at every turn. A visitor from Texas described paying more than $600 for 3 nights at a hotel that initially advertised a $99 rate. By the time they added resort fees, parking, and taxes, it was insane. I could have gone to Hawaii for that money. For many travelers, what was once a bargain getaway has turned into a cautionary tale. Whispers from inside the industry add another layer. Employees quietly admit that many price hikes are not about covering costs, but about recouping the billions spent on flashy projects like the Formula One Grand Prix or the $2.3 billion Sphere Arena. The city's biggest players gamble on mega projects to keep Vegas relevant, but when those bets don't pay off quickly, it's the workers and residents who shoulder the burden. We were told these events would bring in jobs and opportunities, a hotel housekeeper explained. Instead, it feels like they brought more bills for us, not for them. Perhaps most unsettling is the sense of exhaustion. People are tired of fighting to survive in a city that markets itself as paradise. They talk about friends moving away to cheaper states like Arizona, Texas, or even further east. They describe coworkers taking second or third jobs just to stay afloat. And they ask a haunting question: what happens when even the workers who keep Las Vegas alive can no longer afford to live here? The voices of insiders paint a sobering picture. A city that once thrived on community and affordability is alienating both its residents and its visitors. Yet, the most chilling part may be this: if the people closest to the system are already sounding the alarm. What bigger secrets are still hidden behind closed doors? The rising cost of living in Las Vegas isn't just a matter of economics. It's also tied to battles in courtrooms and scandals buried beneath polished casino floors. Over the last decade, a series of lawsuits and regulatory fights have exposed the ugly underbelly of how the city's biggest corporations squeeze money from both tourists and residents. And each revelation raises the same chilling thought: if this is what we know, what's still being kept in the dark? One of the most notorious examples is the ongoing controversy over resort fees. What began as a minor add-on for amenities like Wi-Fi and pool access ballooned into one of the most hated charges in America's travel industry. Guests booked hotel rooms for $90 a night, only to discover upon checkout mandatory fees adding $50 or more per day. By 2023, these hidden charges became so widespread that the Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys general launched investigations. Multiple lawsuits accused major casino operators of deceptive advertising practices, forcing them to disclose fees more clearly. Yet even after settlements and fines, the practice continued. Why? Because resort fees brought in hundreds of millions of dollars annually, money casinos had no intention of giving up. But the lawsuits didn't stop there. In 2024, several Strip workers filed claims against their employers, alleging that wage theft and unfair scheduling were standard practice. Casino giants, they argued, cut corners on labor costs, even as they poured billions into new stadiums, arenas, and luxury projects. One case revealed internal memos where managers discussed maximizing profit by minimizing staffing, leaving workers stretched thin, while executives pocketed record bonuses. For employees already struggling with soaring rents and grocery bills, these revelations confirmed what they long suspected: the system wasn't broken, it was designed this way. There are also disputes over utilities, a less glamorous but equally critical battleground. Locals complain that energy companies hold a monopoly with little oversight on rising rates. Advocacy groups have sued, claiming that deals struck between the city and private energy providers lock residents into inflated costs. For families forced to pay $300 or more in monthly summer bills, these courtroom battles are more than legal drama. They're the difference between keeping the lights on or facing eviction. Behind all of these lawsuits lies a bigger question about who really controls Las Vegas. While city officials often tout job creation and tax revenue, critics argue that decisions are made with corporate profits in mind, not the well-being of residents. The Formula One Grand Prix is a perfect example. The event promised to bring billions in tourism revenue, but lawsuits quickly emerged from local businesses who claimed the months-long street closures devastated their income. Ordinary workers bore the brunt, losing wages while corporations reaped sponsorship deals. Even after the race ended, scars remained both on the city's roads and in its reputation. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect is the secrecy. Court filings often reference confidential agreements or settlements sealed from the public eye. Journalists who dig too deep encounter stone walls of non-disclosure clauses and corporate lawyers. A pattern emerges: the people of Las Vegas see their bills climb higher and higher, yet the reasons remain hidden behind locked doors and legal jargon. The truth slips out only when lawsuits force it into the light. These cases reveal a harsh reality. The city's rising living costs are not simply the result of natural inflation or market forces. They are the outcome of deliberate strategies backed by billion-dollar corporations, defended in courtrooms, and protected by secrecy. If what we've seen in public records is only part of the story, then one can only wonder, how much deeper does this iceberg really go? The fallout from Las Vegas's soaring living costs is already reshaping the city in ways that are impossible to ignore. For residents, the dream of building a stable life in the desert is slipping away. Families who once saw Las Vegas as an affordable alternative to California now find themselves priced out. Stories of lifelong locals packing up and leaving have become common. Many are heading to states like Arizona, Texas, and Idaho, where housing costs are lower and utilities less punishing. The irony is hard to miss: a city once famous for attracting newcomers is now driving its own people away. The consequences ripple beyond housing. Small businesses already struggling to compete with mega resorts are being crushed under the weight of higher rents and dwindling local customers. Neighborhood diners, barbershops, and mom-and-pop stores are closing at alarming rates. The Strip still glitters, but the communities behind it are dimming. Even the service industry, the backbone of Vegas, can't escape. Workers juggling 2 or 3 jobs admit they can barely cover essentials, and younger generations are questioning whether it makes sense to stay in a city that offers little security. Tourism is also beginning to feel the pressure. While corporate executives boast of record profits, many visitors quietly grumble that Las Vegas no longer feels like a bargain. A family trip that once cost a few $100s can now easily climb into the thousands. Reviews increasingly describe the Strip as a trap, a place designed not for fun, but for draining wallets. If that perception spreads, the city could face a long-term decline, just as Atlantic City did when gamblers and tourists decided it wasn't worth the money anymore. Looking ahead, 2 futures emerge. The first is bleak. If nothing changes, Las Vegas could transform into an exclusive playground for the wealthy, where only high rollers and international elites can afford to play. Locals will continue to flee, leaving behind a hollow workforce that corporations struggle to replace. The city may still glitter on the surface, but beneath the neon, it will be a shell of its former self. This version of Vegas becomes less a city and more a facade maintained for outsiders while its core rots away. The second future, however, offers hope. If city leaders and corporations recognize the danger of pushing out the very people who sustain Las Vegas, reforms could follow. That might mean stricter oversight on fees, investment in affordable housing, or policies to cap utility costs. It could also mean diversifying the economy beyond gambling and tourism, creating industries that give residents more stable, better-paying jobs. The question is whether there is enough political will and enough time to make those changes before the damage becomes irreversible. In the end, the consequences are not just about money. They are about identity. Las Vegas built its reputation on being the place where anyone rich or poor could feel like a star, even if only for a weekend. If the city loses that essence, it risks losing far more than revenue. It risks losing its soul. And the haunting question remains: can Las Vegas reinvent itself before the very idea of the city becomes nothing more than a memory? Las Vegas was built on the promise of affordability, a city where anyone could escape reality without emptying their savings. But the story we've uncovered reveals a much darker truth. Behind the neon glow and billion-dollar projects, ordinary residents are suffocating under skyrocketing rents, endless hidden fees, and utility bills that never stop climbing. Tourists, too, are beginning to feel betrayed. realizing that the bargain getaway they once dreamed of has morphed into one of the most expensive traps in America. What we see today is a city at war with its own identity. The corporations that profit from Las Vegas have gambled on squeezing every last dollar, and for now, they're winning. But the cost is steep, entire communities are being pushed out, workers are burning out, and the very foundation of the Vegas dream is starting to crumble. And so, the question falls to all of us. If Las Vegas, the one city designed to make life feel cheap and glamorous, is now too expensive for both residents and visitors, what does that say about the future of the American dream itself? Perhaps Vegas is only the beginning. Perhaps this neon city in the desert is the warning sign for what could happen to countless other places across the United States. If one of the most iconic playgrounds in the world can collapse under the weight of greed and rising costs, then which city will be next?